This is probably the worst football game of all time. World Cup Carnival is notorious for being an absolute disgrace of a game and for desecrating the good name of the World Cup. And this game is so bad that screenshots just don't do it justice. You have to play it for yourself to really get a feel for it. I honestly can't believe I actually sat down and played this game. Well, as you guys know, it's World Cup time, and I certainly know a whole lot about this. I'm living right in the middle of it, right? World Cup time means talking more about the World Cup, and what better way to talk about the World Cup than talking about the worst World Cup game of all time, right? This is the time where all of the football game developers are digging really deep to figure out how to stick add-ons into their games to satisfy people who actually like international football. And yeah, I'm talking about Sports Interactive. I mean, it's not that I'm 100% against playing FM26, I'm probably only 95% disgusted with this game at this point, but I still find it to be a major failure for Sports Interactive. As you know, Sports Interactive recently made this big deal about the return of international football, the Football Manager, something that should have been in FM26 from the start. And of course, people are frustrated since it's basically exactly the same as the broken version we had in the older games. So you could be tempted to think that Football Manager 26 has like the worst World Cup mode out of any game. But you would be dead wrong. I mean, you'd be way wrong on this. There are World Cup themed football games out there that seriously should never have existed. In my opinion, World Cup USA 94 by US Gold is one of the worst of all time. US Gold inexplicably decided to get rid of all the text in the menus for every single port of this game. That makes the menu system a complete and utter mess. In fact, it's actually worse than the awful user interface in Football Manager 26. Now you might think that this is an easy problem to solve, right? You just get a copy of the manual and there you go. No, it doesn't work like that. The manual is really vague. They printed like the one manual in 8 different languages at once. The text is small. It doesn't tell you anything. The game's just a complete and utter failure, and that's before you get to playing the game itself. As you can see, World Cup USA 94 is so fast that you have no idea what you're doing. This might look interesting if you've never played it before, but honestly, it's a total pain in the neck. Every single port of this game has this bizarre speed issue, and I'm not aware of any way to make it playable. I mean, even the freaking Game Boy version is almost impossible to play, and the screen is so small that it's a joke. If you had this game when you were a kid, allow me to apologize. I really do feel bad for you. But this isn't the first time US Gold came out with an absolutely ridiculous football game. Oh no, in fact, World Cup USA 94 looks like a masterpiece compared to the game that we're going to talk about today. Yeah, you heard right. We're going back in time to play the worst of the worst, World Cup Carnival from 1986. Now, World Cup Carnival came out on several computer systems, though I think the most well-known is this version for the old Spectrum 48K. The original release of the game came with all sorts of extra cardboard and patches and stickers and other stuff that theoretically might be worth something to collectors. Of course, the reality is that this game is only worth like $15 at most, and that's being generous. Notice that there are no bids here. Now, the reason why this game is worth like no money, even with that cool badge, is because it's just such an infamously bad game. I mean, this is the biggest failure of all football video game failures. This game came out in 1986, sure, but it was outdated the moment that it entered the market. And, you know, I can't just talk about it. I've got to show you guys just how bad this game is. Okay, just so you know, we're actually going to play the Commodore 64 version, not the Spectrum version, and that's because I decided to play it on the Commodore instead. I suppose we could glimpse at the instructions first. Honestly, I've got no idea what it means here with these references to bollards, since there's nothing like that anywhere in this game. And just think, we could fill in the correct results for 1986 and see if we might get one of those US Gold game cassettes. Yeah, that's right, cassettes. This came out in that brief period of time when most of these games were coming out on cassette instead of on disc. This was mostly a money-saving measure. I honestly don't remember this era of computing, by the way. I was only 2 years old in 1986, and besides, back then most United States computers were using floppy disk drives. Anyway, after you sew your patch onto your leather jacket, you stick the tape into the cassette and you get started. You get to this famous screen and you push play. Eventually you get to the famous loading ready run screen, and then the magic finally happens. And this is what you get. Now, the first problem with the Commodore 64 version of this game is that the controls are awful. I mean, they're just simply horrible. This might be because of my emulator, I'm not quite sure, so I'll just show you. Okay, so here's an average keyboard, right? Well, the up, down, left, and right buttons for this game are these buttons over here. And they're not in any particular order either. The first time I played this game, I couldn't even start. I was mashing every possible key, but I couldn't get the guy I controlled to kick off, and the time was just ticking down. And there's no way to change the keys, at least not in-game, that is. Now, I'm assuming that this is an emulator issue and that if I played it on the original hardware, it would actually work right. But seriously, why couldn't they give you an option to change the input keys around? I've played other games from the mid-1980s and even the early 1980s that allow you to customize controls. So this game's already in big trouble. Anyway, after messing around a bit, I finally figured out the awkward controls in the practice mode. And I seriously don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing in this mode, just push Q to quit, I guess. I mean, I guess this is like for ball control or something, but this isn't the sort of game where you actually have control over the ball. Anyway, now that I had like this vague idea of what the controls were, it was time to start the World Cup. Now, I decided to play as Argentina. After all, we're talking about 1986 here, right? And let me tell you, this was really eye-opening. Anyway, you kick off and everybody just stands there. Half the time the computer kicks the ball the wrong way while everybody else just stands there. And sometimes the computer remembers where the goal is and my keeper conveniently ducks out of the way. Alright, I know what you're thinking. It's not that bad, right? I mean, it's in color at least, right? And this was 1986. I mean, all the games from 1986 sucked, right? Well, trust me, this game is worse than you think. Oh man, this is bad. Defense consists mostly of controlling one guy and running behind the man with the ball, which means that you give up a ton of goals. Now, it is possible to score a goal, though I had to figure out a trick to do it. I was able to get the Italian defender to kick the ball right into his own net. What a perfect own goal. But sadly, our defenders went back to just standing there, and so we gave up goal after goal. We did make a powerful save at the end, but we still fell short. We lost by that unfortunate score of 7-1. Yeah, there was no hand of God this time around. It was more like the excrement of Satan. But hey, at least we tried, or something like that. Anyway, the game itself is really bad, but it's even worse when you consider that there were better games on the same system that had come out years before. This is World Cup on the Commodore 64, a game that came out in 1984. And yes, this should look familiar to you. This is essentially the same game except with slightly better controls and far more annoying music. There isn't quite as much text, and notice in the background the name of the company that created it, Arctic. The cassette tape looked something like this, and seriously, if I had this back in the 1980s, I would get this mixed up with all of my music tapes. And if you knew the kind of music that I listen to, you wouldn't be surprised if I stuck this in like a normal tape player and turned up all the noise and thought it sounded good. I mean, you know, grindcore, crust punk, extreme black metal, it's not all that far away from electronic noise anyway, right? Anyhow, it's obvious that US Gold licensed the Arctic game for World Cup Carnival, and that's where the controversy begins. Now, most of the old reviews focus on the Spectrum version of the game, which was literally Arctic's World Cup with basically no changes made. Now, this isn't my screenshot, but this gives you an idea. World Cup is on top and World Cup Carnival is on the bottom. I mean, the Commodore version certainly looks better, but it's still just an awful game no matter how you look at it. And man, this game just got totally savaged by the critics. I mean, this was the biggest roast of all time. Even back in 1986, people were criticizing this game for having horrible graphics. I do find it funny that people say that this game is too easy, but like I said, it's probably an emulation problem. But the real complaint was here at the bottom. This was a recycled 2-year-old game just as I described to you. I mean, hey, why bother coming out with a new game when you can just take an old game and give it a new name? That's the sort of thing that US Gold was up to. This was a really, really sketchy company, and honestly, it should have been nowhere near the official FIFA license. My favorite review is this one, with the nice build-up followed by the "it's awful" second paragraph. But look at this here. They were charging only £10 for this game brand new, and the review was still extremely negative. Another reviewer noted that the original Arctic game wasn't even a good seller. You've got to wonder why US Gold decided to choose that particular game to rip off. The overall score here was a 3 out of 10. But seriously, they gave this game a 4 for addictiveness? That's insane. Meanwhile, Crash Magazine gave it a 26%, and I think that this game got bonus points for being so cheap. Well, unless you wanted the patch, that is. Now, I'm not sure if the version with the patch cost more money or less or whatever. You guys are going to have to let me know. Anyway, this game was so notorious that there's an entire chapter devoted to it in this history of US Gold, and why in the world did anybody write a history of this awful company? The story here actually is pretty simple. US Gold got the license through some sort of nefarious means and needed to find somebody to actually, make the game. And so they called up their good friends at Arctic Computing and asked if they could, borrow their game. So my question is, does it still work that way in software development, right? Do I use this thing and say, hey bro, I just got the FIFA license. Could you, do me a solid? Anyway, the idiots running US Gold were trying to get this game made with 2 months to spare, which explains a lot when you sit down and think about it. Meanwhile, the rights to the source code had been sold off to some guy named Jeff Young, and so the company was in danger of major legal trouble right from the start. The result was Arctic Computing going bankrupt, Mr. Young getting a major payday, and US Gold sticking an unfinished product out on the shelves. And then they crammed the box filled with the patch, stickers, and everything else to try to distract the kids from how awful the game really was. Well, at least they got that part right. I mean, Miles Jacobson and Sports Interactive couldn't be bothered to give us anything extra, no matter how bad FM26 really is, right? The one exciting new feature was something that we already had in the previous games. Anyway, that's the story behind World Cup Carnival, and it's kind of a shame that it didn't bankrupt US Gold in the end. This was an awful game, people complained about it, but US Gold stuck around long enough to give us awful versions of the 1994 World Cup game as well. Anyway, the next time you play the Sega Master System version of World Cup 94, just keep in mind that story of the awful World Cup Carnival. Anyway, when you're speculating about the future of Sports Interactive and, the big B word, you need to remember that even US Gold survived the awful fiasco that was World Cup Carnival, and this was really bad. So perhaps Miles Jacobson's job is safer than we thought. Anyway, as you know, as overpowered as the strikerless formation might be in FM26, it's nowhere near as bad as watching the computer literally walk on by as your defenders stand there staring at it.